Hi there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today we are going to be talking about another subgenre of horror. I have a series that I've been doing on this channel where I break down really niche subgenres of horror and explain them to you guys, and we're doing that again this week. But this week we're going to be talking about analog horror, which is something I'm very excited about. So if you're interested in learning more about analog horror, just keep on watching. Okay, so disclaimer, I have my laptop and I am writing an article about it that will be up on my website later. If you're interested in checking out my website, it's literally just my name, www.castingvangundy.com. So for these subgenre of horror videos or playlists or whatever, I will always have a corresponding article up on my website if you want to visually read everything we talk about today. I will definitely be hitting the major points, but a lot of times my videos are a lot more informal than my articles. But yeah, if you're interested in checking that out, that will be up there soon in the coming day. If it's not already up there now, it will be up there in the coming days. But yeah, so I'm just going to be using this article as a reference point. So if you see me look down or something like that, that's what I'm doing. Just wanted to be transparent with you. So anyway, let us get into it. The article that I'm writing is going to be entitled, "What is Analog Horror? An Internet Phenomenon." This subgenre of horror started out as like an internet fad from the 2010s. It is really like the strange cousin or strange sister of found footage. If you don't know what found footage is, it is this type of horror mechanic where when you're watching a movie or a show or whatever, you're seeing it like in a first person perspective, like as if you are watching a VHS camera or something, and you're witnessing all the bad events go down. Think Blair Witch Project. That's one of my favorite movies that does this. So that is more of the found footage genre where you're discovering what happened to these folks through their own documentation of their activities. And then analog horror is kind of like that, where it is a forced perspective through like you watching tapes, playback, or certain public access thingies. I'll get more into that later. But yes, so it's like that, but it's mostly done online. And for the media that I'm going to be listing, a lot of them are actually YouTube videos. So this is something that can be easily replicated for the amateur filmmaker or somebody who wants to dive into this, because a lot of the stuff that's used is like heavily edited pictures, royalty-free sounds, like non-copyrighted images, and then like people edit this together and just kind of blend it into different ways. The thing that brings found footage and analog horror together, or really sets analog horror apart because it gives it its name, is the fact that it uses outdated media. Analog horror really focuses on analog technology, so like stuff that would have been available in the latter half of the 20th century. Most of the stories take place somewhere between like the 1960s and the 1990s, because the whole like graininess, glitching of like a VHS tape or something like that is what gives it analog horror its unique aesthetic. The imperfections can be just as scary as the narrative itself. And instead of employing something like a traditional jump scare, you could have a hard cut in between footage, or you could have like a grainy effect or like the sound or static to kind of jolt the viewer instead of like a traditional like, ooh, here's a boogeyman type situation. Also with analog horror, I think it's important to note that like very rarely will you find a full-length movie of like analog horror. Most of the videos or media that people make tend to be like around 10 minutes, if that. A lot of the YouTube series I will talk about have multiple videos that could equate to like an hour or two, but each individual themselves is like 10 minutes or under. And so it's meant to be, again, because it's from the internet, it's short form content pretty much. Also, in addition to like the short run times, it's also important to say that a lot of these stories don't have very many characters. Although you're watching something play out in real time, although you're watching something play out on the screen, there's the characters in it tend to be like the victims, so it's not like you're divulging very much into their lives or backstory. The one thing that's great about analog horror is it's set up for more world building than like character narrative. So, and I'll get more into that in a minute, but there's hardly any characters. Most of them end up becoming victims, and the actual emphasis is on this world or monster or whatever that keeps attacking people and potentially spreading to others. Okay, so in my research for this, I found another article by Jordan Mason on Videomaker, and they put together like a bullet point list of the different elements of analog horror, which I thought to be very helpful. So I read through his definitions, and I basically just kind of like re-explained them to my audience for myself. But I took his bullet points and incorporated it into my article, and I just wanted to share those bullet points too of like key elements of analog horror, so you can easily identify it. First and foremost, it is a progressive horror. So what he means by this is that the story starts off as relatively tame and then gets scarier over time, hence being progressive, right? Also, what's interesting is that this buildup is reliant, yes, on what's happening in the story, but it's also dependent on the imagination of the viewer, because a lot of times, like, the narrative won't be completely clear. So the further the viewer runs with their storyline in their head, the scarier that it'll actually be. And that touches on another future point in here in just a second. The second bullet point is twisting the mundane. Something that's very characteristic of analog horror is the warping of everyday elements and twisting them into something terrifying. Analog horror creates an uncanny fear that something can be lurking around the corner in your otherwise normal life. This is often done through the use of light music and images paired with horrific acts, achieving some sort of unnerving contrast. So yeah, if you know me, you know that I am also a writer. I write scary things. And a lot of times what I like to do in my short stories is write something scary involving a piece of technology or like a toy or something from the distant past. Again, I'm not plugging, I'm just referencing my whole book, Cursed Images, Scary Stories from a Childhood of the Internet, really has a similar DNA to analog horror, I would say, except this is obviously not visual media. But a lot of these stories revolve around the internet or like Furbies, Tamagotchis, or like what it's like to be on the early days of the internet and the stuff that can freak you out. So it does employ like a lot of nostalgia for sure. And that's something that I think is really fun to do, is to pair something that has this like whimsical magnetic type quality, like some of our old toys and internet games and stuff like that, and then make it terrifying. So twisting mundane is also common, I think, in some of the other genres I've covered, especially like quiet horror tends to do that, but this is anything but quiet. I just want to preface that it's anything but quiet. So so I have examples further on, and I will illustrate how those examples connect with these things. I'm tempted to talk about it right now, but I don't want to ramble, so I'm going to get through this list first. The third bullet point is vague meanings. These stories tend to be purposely vague. The audience might try to figure out the story for themselves. If viewers are witnessing something that's already happened, they don't have any agency to affect the outcome of the story. Despite seeing things through the perspective of the main character, they are ultimately helpless victims themselves. Additionally, this has the potential for virality and engagement, as fans who watch whatever piece of analog horror it is speculate and share their own theories with others in the comment sections or on other community boards. So yes, this is kind of tying into what I was talking about with imagination earlier, how sometimes the viewer's imaginations can make the story seem scarier than what it actually is. This is done purposely in analog horror, where it's meant to be vague and open up for interpretation. It is because, again, the internet is such a place for community and community engagement. Part of the fun of analog horror is that people are coming up with their own reasonings and rationales for what's actually happening and going on, and you can find awesome like fan theories about different things online, or it feels like you're solving a puzzle, and even though you feel helpless in the video because you can't control who lives or dies, you can try to add your own part to the story in a way, by like commenting on videos and trying to share your speculations with others. And that way you're a lot more engaged than you would like a traditional movie or something like that. I mean, I guess there's community fan pages for movies too, but with analog horror, it being online and it being in the form of videos, YouTube videos, Instagram videos, whatever, it's more instantaneous, I think, and it feels more immediate, and it's more fun to engage in that kind of way. Point number 4, again, I'm like blends together, left to the imagination. Rather than rely on jump scares or graphic violence, analog horror forces the viewer to rely on the imaginations to fill in the gaps. They have to picture the atrocities unfolding, which can stay with them long after they press pause on their video. So yeah, I kind of hit on this earlier where people had used their imaginations to fill in the gaps. This is also in regards to like graphic content on the screen. There is not a lot of graphic content in analog horror. There's a lot of unnerving things, and they might reference like violent things happening, but rarely do you ever see that actually playing out on screen. Most of the times it's done off screen, or there'll be something like a blood splatter or like a picture of someone lying on the floor, right? It's not like an active action happening in the video. So that's also something to note, that this tends to be another characteristic of analog horror. Number 5 is that there's no soundtrack. In order to be as believable as possible, many analog horror videos lack an actual soundtrack. They may employ jingles or sounds when applicable, like an introduction to a radio or television program, but other than that, these short films are meant to mimic the reality we live in, with the uncanny leaking in some bizarre way. I'm going to put like a little asterisk to this, because like, yes, there's no soundtrack in the terms of like what you would feel in like a formal movie, but that doesn't mean that these videos are completely devoid of sound. I've seen some videos that are like dash cam footage in a car, and they have all the typical car noises that you would have, like the radio's on, you know, you can hear the tires screeching, you can hear the brakes, you can hear the rustling of leaves and stuff outside. So these films aren't quiet, it's just they don't have like a traditional soundtrack like you would in like a feature film where you like pay a bunch of money to have Doja Cat or some other person singing over a fight scene. Okay, great. Okay, the next bullet point is beyond comprehension. This is a fun one. This subgenre often employs the use of eldritch horrors, cryptids, aliens, or alternate dimensions to instill a feeling of unknowable dread. Because there's no easy explanation of the threat, it feels bigger than oneself and becomes even scarier than your average neighborhood boogeyman. Okay, so this is the kind of horror that I am... Oh, sorry. This is the kind of horror that I'm a sucker for. I love, like, overarching feelings of doom and dread and absolute helplessness, and like kind of like eldritch horrors where you're meeting like a godlike figure, right? Like you are an ant to them, so what are you gonna do? That is so scary to me. So I'm kind of a sucker for the beyond comprehension type of horror. You can find, there's like a whole subgenre of horror that's just like eldritch horror, where it's the same thing, where it incorporates these like folky elements of like there being some like supernatural being or oddity or interdimensional space god that is deciding to toy around with some small town or something. I think like if you look at my other videos about dark fantasy, I reference Lovecraft. And a lot of this originated with Lovecraft, like in his cosmic horrors. I already said my piece about how he was kind of like problematic and stuff, but his legacy is still really felt within horror. And I think this is another branch of that, where analog horror does tend to embody things that would like just are bizarre, make no sense, and that we can't fully comprehend. And yeah, I'm working on something right now that kind of like feels like that, but I'm not really sure what direction to go in, because I want it to feel like the tagline I've been using is like Cthulhu but comforting. So let's see if I can pull that off. I don't know, but I feel like that for me is like where a lot of fear and anxiety come from. It's like the unknown. Like I'm somebody who freaks out when they think too much about death and what comes next. So this definitely hits home for me as something that's like uber scary. The next bullet point is, or the last bullet point from Jordan Mason is no happy endings. In most cases, analog horror does not have a happy ending. In order for us to witness what happens to the story, the cameraman or woman or whoever must ultimately meet their demise, so that we find the footage evidence and then potentially become the next victim. So yeah, there's no happy endings. a lot of the times when you watch these shows, even if like the threat is resolved, there's still like a vague possibility of it coming back and returning, or or it's just like a documentation of some apocalyptic event, or several things like that. So yeah, no happy endings. And I feel like a lot of horror movies, well, no, there's quite a few horror movies that do have happy endings. But I feel like for me personally, if it's true horror, then it's not a happy thing. You're not gonna have a good time. Yeah, maybe that's a given. I don't know, but yeah, no happy endings. Now there was another point I wanted to bring up because I read a separate article. Oh yeah, it was by Mitali Partha, and she was discussing analog horror. And she brought up something I kind of touched on before, but I just want to add this extra section called imperfect nostalgia. In addition to the elements above, analog horror also relies on the distortion of childhood memories, primarily through the use of outdated technology and familiar themes. As mentioned earlier, they utilize things like educational films, home photos and videos, public service announcements, and childish cartoons or songs that invoke an intimate feeling while horrible events are taking place. Now, I'm going to quote Partha directly about the intersection of nostalgia and analog horror. By utilizing outdated media formats, analog horror taps into a sense of lost technology and forgotten times. It creates a disconnect from the polished perfection of modern media, making the experience feel more visceral and real. The imperfections become a portal to the world where something sinister may be lurking, hidden beneath the surface of a distorted VHS tape or a grainy podcast. I got really excited when I saw her point, and again, I mentioned it previously because that's something I like to do with my own creative writing, is incorporate a feeling of imperfect nostalgia. I think what their point about a modern media being so polished and perfect is like, it's like it can create its own uncanny valley, because if something looks too perfect, they don't seem like human anymore. And I think people have really explored that theme within techno horror quite a bit, or even like stuff like Black Mirror, and like seeing technology in a futuristic setting provoke these scary and unnatural sort of feelings in us is really cool in itself. But when it's done in the past, there's something about it that feels a lot more gut punchy to me, because when it's the future, it's not like a guaranteed thing. It's a possibility, but it's not a guaranteed outcome, right? Because we can't predict the future, right? Like, we can put on all these scary things and these scary hypotheses about the future of technology and how that's going to incorporate within our daily lives, and to what degree. But ultimately, like, we still have the potential to stop it. So for me, it doesn't evoke that same sense of fear. But for something that's done in the past, it feels you can't change the past, right? So when you see that, I feel like it's a little bit more reactive, I think, or it's easier to be reactive based on that, in my opinion. Just me personally, because it's like saying that, like, oh, remember this thing that brought you comfort? Just kidding, it's horrible. So yeah, I don't know, I just really liked that addition to it, because I feel like the other Jordan's article didn't. It talked about the techniques and methodology to create something that looked like it came from the past, but it didn't really hit on the emotional impact of that, whereas this person brought that point up, and so I wanted to acknowledge her, and this, I assume her, in this article. But yeah. And then kind of related to that, because I was thinking about, like, okay, I do this in my writing, right? And I'm like, but I was like, but can that really count as analog horror? Because so much of analog horror relies on visuals. And then I was racking my brain, and then come to find out, I have an answer for y'all. So a lot of analog horror videos actually originated from something called a creepypasta. And if you don't know what a creepypasta is, they're basically like viral internet scary stories that were posted online. In some way, shape, or form. There's like a dedicated website to creepypastas, but a lot of the times creepypastas are fun because they bring a sort of folklore to the internet. A lot of creepypastas or these stories don't really have a concrete origin to them, or if they do, it's kind of ambiguous and people kind of add on their own things, the same way people would with like oral narration. Back in the past, before written communication, you tell the same stories over again. They become local legends. They become part of your folklore and culture. And for me, creepypastas really do that on the internet. I'm not the first to really come up with this idea. I watched a video by Strange Eons. I love that channel. If you ever want to do like internet, not just internet deep dives, but something that feels almost like a historic catalog of the internet, I really recommend checking out their channel a lot. I mean, they do things primarily through like a Tumblr lens, but I just find this concept of like an internet historian so fascinating. And I wonder how one gets qualified in that, because I would love to add that to my resume as like an internet historian. But anyway, so yeah, creepypastas. Basically the folklore of the internet. And a lot of these videos actually are inspired by or based off of some sort of creepypasta online. Yeah, some of the most famous creepypastas or stories that I can name for you are The Backrooms, Jeff the Killer, Slender Man, Siren Head, Candle Cove, that Momo chick. Yeah, there's a ton of them. And if you grew up in the early days of the internet, I can't, you know this feeling where you're not really quite sure if something's true or not. And like before the whole misinformation thing, people were doing that with like scary stories, right? And so when you're a kid sneaking online in your computer and like reading stuff and you're like, oh my god, it like, I don't know, it just did something to you in a way that I'm not sure can be replicated anymore. Because again, now we have, one would hope a lot of us have media literacy and like, actually not really, but have a familiarity with like the fact that you can't believe everything you read on the internet, right? But when I was growing up, that was still a new thing. And so yeah, that invokes a lot of fun memories and feelings for me. So yeah, creepypastas, let's talk about them. Okay, there's some examples on here that are directly inspired by some creepypastas. And I'm gonna put like a photo or a link to these videos in the description if you want to watch them yourself. They're really entertaining. So transitioning from creepypastas to analog horror videos, Local 58 is a web series that is based on a creepypasta called Candle Cove, which I mentioned before. And the person who wrote Candle Cove and the person who's making these videos are one and the same. Their name is Chris Straub. And this whole series presents kind of like retro public access news footage, and it just documents strange things that occur in a specific area, like the local news channel. I watched these videos, a lot of them are varied, like, I talked about the dash cam footage before, I think that's in this series. Excuse me. There is one that I think is the scariest. And it's like a fake news broadcast, like as if the US got taken over by another country and the government is encouraging everybody to perform a certain act in rebelliousness to being taken over by another country. So that's pretty scary. And then I think they had one that was like a kid's cartoon that was like skeletons and stuff. So that one I feel like is more varied in its DNA, and yeah, so I'm sure if you've already read that creepypasta and you didn't know these videos existed, you would probably gravitate toward them and really, really enjoy them. So I will also put that down there. But yeah, it plays in the nostalgia factor with like retro TV footage. Again, the usual typography is like like it's grainy. It's like you know, in the style of old VHS tapes or old reproductions of the news. A lot of these videos are also really ambiguous in terms of like you're not really sure what's going on, and you feel like you kind of stumbled onto something. So it follows a lot of the traditional tropes of analog horror. Another series that I thought was pretty good actually is called The Smile Tapes. Now this this is a little messed up, not gonna lie. So this whole series is, it feels very of the internet, like in terms of the storytelling motifs and the highly edited pictures of the victims. You can tell this is of and by the internet. They are a YouTube video series created by Federico, excuse me, that catalogs the spread of a deadly fungus. Well, the spoilers. I should kind of warn that this is like spoilers. Okay, great. The spread of a deadly fungus known as the jester through a black market drug known for forcing people to smile. And so a lot of the pictures have people with like really exaggerated smiles and faces. and to the point where they clearly look like memes, but you know, it's okay. Back then it would have been scary, and it still invokes this kind of feeling of uncanny valley-ish stuff. So um yeah, also this took place in the mid 90s, I believe, mid to late 90s. The story is set in the mid to late 90s for this one. Yeah. These tapes document the spread of this virus and the attacks and the sorts of things that this fungus causes people to end up doing to others. And I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to go into too much, but it does talk about this fungus, and it brings up like random cuts of other media too. So not only are you listening to testimonials from police files or victims or whatever, but there's also like random uh, edited images or deep fake footage of like dinosaur documentaries, and like there's even a deep fake video of Bill Clinton talking about this fungus, and I thought that was a nice touch. I thought that was really, really cool. Um, but yeah, so there's not a lot of jump scares, but they do tackle certain themes, and but I get it's scary, but I thought it was like really creative and fun. And even though that the series does have a definitive ending, sort of like it has a resolution, which is uncommon for analog horror, there's still a possibility, like it's implied that this threat is going to come back again eventually in the future. So yeah, I don't know, but I still think this counts as analog horror. Like the aesthetics alone go off. So if you want to check it out, I enjoyed this one. Again, I'll have links in my description for all of these. I'm going to talk about another one, and then I'm going to talk about my favorite one, and then I'm going to talk about a movie, like an actual movie that was made. So, so speaking of like creepy pastas and internet garbage, um, there's also this analog horror series called Sonic Limited Edition: The Lost Cartridge, and I'm going to give you, it's really hard because if I give you the synopsis to these things, it's kind of like a spoiler. So I'm going to try to be vague in case you want to check it out, but I'm going to talk about like what it is and how it relates to analog horror, or how it fits in the subgenre. So this 7-part YouTube series was created by Jordan Gaming 101, and it's based off of a creepypasta about Sonic XEX. Wait, no, Sonic EXE. I don't know why I said XEX. I think about Charlie XEX. So sorry. But yeah, so this was based on a creepypasta called Sonic.exe, and it's basically a cursed gameplay footage of Sonic the Hedgehog. Like it's like a cursed game. It's like evil Sonic who hunts down the other side characters in his own game. There, spoiler. Over time, it's revealed that like he is some sort of omnipotent supernatural deity that is trying to like leak out into the world or bring people into this world. It's a little ambiguous, so I don't know. But yeah, so Demon Sonic, Demon Sonic is employed here, but the visuals of it are literally fun because it looks like you're playing a retro Sonic game. So again, it brings in that sort of nostalgia, outdated tech, something familiar, but something's not quite right, something's being corrupted, something feels off, right? So like again, it does the thing where it hooks you in because it's such a perversion of something that feels familiar to you and known, while also being, I don't know, just kind of like, it's like scary. It feels a little silly, but it's scary. And like imagine being a kid and seeing this, you probably are like freaking out, right? So if you want to check that out too, feel free. I just think it's funny that they did that to Sonic, and I don't know how anyone didn't get in trouble for that with Sega, but you know, work. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite ones right now, and truthfully, I have not finished the series yet. I'm on video 17 out of 19, so, but I love this. This is also based on a creepypasta, but these videos and aesthetic and creepypasta really, really, really inspired my book, like heavily. So I just want to fan out a little bit and geek out a little bit about this, but it's the Backrooms. If you're not a chronically online internet person, you might not know what the Backrooms are, but there's this subset of the internet that I admittedly am a part of where I'm on different Facebook groups that post pictures of like liminal spaces. So liminal spaces are kind of like pictures of places that seem like they're too still to be natural, but they are everyday random places. This could be pictures of like abandoned malls. These could be pictures of like indoor swimming pools, offices, airports, the Denver airport, specifically. But like these places that just seem so empty and still, that they seem sort of ominous, right? There's something off. There's a fight or flight response triggered. And for some reason, those liminal spaces invoke that in me as well. And I don't know if it's like a biological fear of that, or if it's just socially implied. But I love liminal spaces. I have this love fear relationship with those liminal spaces, and that's kind of what the back rooms are to an extent. So the back rooms, oh my god. So this series kind of is like, okay, so basically the story of the videos is kind of like a magnetic field has been manipulated. There is another dimensional realm that we can tap into. In the story, again, I'm not trying to spoil it for anybody, but here we go. In the stories, there's some people who kind of fall through these gaps in space and time and end up being in the back rooms, or there's like an organization that's purposely trying to open the door and get into the back rooms for capitalism, profit, you name it. The people who slide in between, I feel like is a lot more interesting because it can happen at any point in time. And I think that's what feels scarier to me, is that you could just fall into another dimension. But in the back rooms, it's an endless vastness amount of space, right? But the majority of it looks like dingy office spaces, like crusty, moldy carpets, not moldy, but mildewy. Like it smells like mildew. Like that's what the vibes, the off yellow walls, the fluorescent lighting, the inconsistent fluorescent lighting, the carpet that you just know is mildewy, is there. But there's endless amounts of like office spaces, and a lot of them are shaped in bizarre ways, so it'll look totally normal, and then you get to the room and there's like a random like square hole in the floor that you slide down and you go to a new space, or there's cutouts and walls that you gotta climb up. So it just feels like an endless maze of of dingy office spaces. And in the back rooms, there's certain areas that kind of break that mold and act as like a jarring shock, because it's abnormal, right? So because one could say like, okay, I'm lost in an office building, okay, you can come to terms with that. But then later on you get, bam, you go through a door and you end up in somebody's living room, or you end up in a little neighborhood street, an empty neighborhood street, and or you end up, yeah, like someone's farmhouse, or you end up in like a concrete parking lot with no, but the thing is with the back rooms is that there's no sky and there's no light, so you can't really tell what time of day it is. It's all just inconsistent fluorescent lighting. And also, like, how the fuck you got electricity there? Anyway, so yeah, that's all. These questions make it so bizarre and weird, and you can tell how much I like this because I'm so passionate about it. But I fucking love the back rooms. So yeah, all this weird stuff. I think there is a part where there's a closed off swimming pool too, and that's kind of like, I used that inspiration for one of my short stories in Cursed Images. There is a character called the Backrooms Browser, and to get to her you kind of go through the backrooms, and yeah, I love it. Okay, so yeah, so not only is this like the vastness, people are also get lost, they get hurt in this maze because there is a monster roaming about, and I won't be too descriptive of the monster because I don't want to like spoil it for you, but that's basically what the backrooms is. And the videos vary in length, and sometimes they're found footage accounts of people falling through with a camera, and then some of them are like government files of the researchers going in and cataloging their experiences that way. So yeah. But this is my favorite series out of all of them I've mentioned. Again, a 16-year-old made these videos, and at the time, I mean, there's some where you can tell like, okay, yeah, that's not real, but some of them are really, really well done. And the feeling of suspense you get when you watch these videos is incredible. So this person was like very talented to be doing all this. And I think A24 is actually going to come out with their own Backrooms movie in 2025. So that is super exciting. I'm so curious to see how they're going to tackle that like an actual movie, and how well it's going to hit with audiences, because this even though like for me it seems normalized because again I'm really inspired by this kind of stuff. um I feel like it's not super mainstream. I guess out of all these maybe the Backrooms is the most mainstream. But yeah, I'm not sure. There is a movie I do want to talk about, and this is my last example and probably like towards the end of this video, which is Skinamarink. And maybe you guys have been thinking about this ever since I've been talking about analog horror. But Skinamarink, it was a movie that came out I think last year, and it is basically analog horror in a long form, a long form medium. So, uh, if you don't know, Skinamarink is kind of like a story where these kids wake up in the middle of the night and they can't find their parents. They can't find their dad primarily, and all the doors and the windows in their house go missing. And you just watch. And when I say kids, they're like 4 and 6. Like they're very very young, and so you're watching them just kind of live in this house and being trapped in this house. So much so that like their toilet even like poops. Their toilet even poofs out of existence, and that by itself is scary. Like what the hell? Um, but yeah, so it builds on the suspense. It's constantly dark no matter what time of day it was because they don't have any doors or windows. They can't really tell how much time is passing. They can't tell what day it is, so they kind of just wake up on their own sleep cycle to like consistent darkness in their own home, and the entire time as like a source of like comfort, but also the only source of lighting a lot of times is the TV in their main living room, and it's like playing these cartoons the entire time. So the cartoons themselves kind of become like the soundtrack of the movie. And again, I think this takes place in 1995. I'm not quite sure, but it's around that time. If it takes place in the 90s, so yeah, these kids, because they're spooked, they don't want to sleep in their own rooms. Do not blame them. They're sleeping in the living room, and there is something ominous that's kind of like toying with them this whole time. And I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to spoil it for you. Um, but yeah, it's really scary. It's hard. I feel bad because okay, when I watched this in the comfort of my own home with subtitles on because I'm a subtitles type person, and I'm thankful I had those subtitles because a lot of the times there's very little dialogue in this movie, and a lot of the times the narrative is based off of like sounds, but sometimes those sounds can be hard to identify. um like I had the subtitles that said like, oh, fabric moving or like blanket, like, so I'm like, okay, the kid's getting out of bed and jumping off the blanket or whatever. um a lot of this movie is very very dark. Like visually it's like very dark. So it's kind of hard to see what's going around. Plus, it's like filmed at these like incredibly awkward angles to increase like the voyeurism aspect of this film. But like you're not even seeing the kid's face at all. You see like their feet, or like you have the awkward angle that points up at their ceiling, or that like, um, it's just really really weird angles. So you're really trying to the movie forces you to piece together what's going on. Even like I was trying to piece together the layout of the home in my head, like as a split level home, but that's not really well defined either. Like you really have to do a lot of guesswork in terms of what's the layout of the space, like where are the kids at, um, what's going on, who are they talking to, each other or something else, who knows. Or like they would go in the kitchen and try to get food, and you could hear like the plastic of like chip bags opening and stuff like that, but you can't really define what kind of food it was. You know what I mean? So I had subtitles to help fill in those gaps, but I feel like in the theater you wouldn't have that. I feel like in the theater this would be such a scary experience. Oh my goodness. Because you're in the dark with them, like metaphorically and literally. So yeah. This movie, I think, from what I can tell, was very polarizing with fans online. I remember when it came out, a lot of my mutuals on Instagram went to go see it, and they really liked it. They thought it was really cool, but I think people who aren't necessarily like aware of what they were trying to do didn't really like appreciate the film. So I saw some reviews online that were talking about like how it's just a dark mess and they had no idea what was going on, and they didn't enjoy the movie because of that. Um, like, because yeah, this was pretty experimental, I think. Um, considering what all we've talked about with analog horror, the fact that like this isn't really common in long form media outside of the internet. So this sort of movie was guaranteed to be experimental, and when things are experimental, like you're probably going to get like a hot cold reaction to it. Like either you love it or you really really hate it. So there's quite a few people that did not enjoy this film because of those reasons. Primarily just because of the vagueness too. I don't think people are used to having just open-ended plot, or like little to no plot, I guess. Not that there wasn't a plot. There was a plot, but it's ambiguous what's going on. So I'm going to try to say this without spoilers. Sorry. But um the fun of this movie is that people were speculating amongst themselves and online about what the heck's actually going on, right? So there is a range of theories about this movie, all from this Kevin's little boy. This was all just part of Kevin's dream. The movie opens with Kevin sleepwalking and like hitting his head, right? So some people are like, oh, this is just, we're all in Kevin's nightmare. This is Kevin's nightmare. Or some of the people also thought it was more of like a metaphor for domestic abuse. Just because the dad took him to the hospital and he had a big cut and he's like, oh, he fell down the stairs, which is like a common excuse or like fib that people who do these sorts of things say to the hospitals when people start asking questions about their kids. Notably, the mom is not in the picture in the film, so we don't know if she like left her kids there or if she died or really what's going on. But the mom is in the movie for a split second. When it comes to the older sister's perspective, she kind of wanders off and sees some stuff. But yeah, we don't know what the relationship with the parents is like. We don't know what the relationship with the kids is like. We have no idea. The monster is completely unseen, and just kind of like messes with them the whole time in a very cruel way. So we don't know if this like is literally happening, where there's like some sort of monster preying on this family. We don't know if it's like Kevin's dream. We don't know if it's like Kevin's dream. Or we don't really know if this is all just a metaphor for a monster living in their home. You know what I mean? In the form of an abusive parent. So yeah, so it's open-ended, but like knowing what we know about analog horror, what we've been talking about it again, like I feel like this is textbook concrete analog horror. It's nostalgic, it's dated, it's literally an ambiguous monster like figure that is like you there's no escaping. You're literally trapped. Like there's no hope of getting out of your situation. And then like and purposely vague for people to speculate and like come up with their own theories about the movie. So all of these are quintessential parts of analog horror. And this is like the first big instance I think of it becoming a little bit more mainstream. There's also the show on Netflix called Archive 81, which was really really good. Some people called that an analog horror just because the main character has to watch these tapes to try to piece together what's going on. But I'm not fully convinced of that. I'm not fully convinced it's like pure analog horror. I'll have to rewatch it again just to see. But that show was canceled after like one season, which sucks because I remember enjoying it quite a bit. But even though it employs the use of tapes, I don't know if I would call it analog horror. But that's just me. But yeah, but we're getting the Backrooms movie soon, so maybe it'll be a little bit more mainstream after that. I don't know, but I'm excited to see that. Okay, so this is the part where these are just going to be my conclusions, I guess, or like my final thoughts about analog horror. I really like this genre personally. It's weird. It employs a lot of the same techniques that I do when I write, and I'm just I am very much inspired by analog horror, 100%. I think what makes analog horror so awesome as like a sub genre of horror is that it's so accessible, and not only for people who want to watch it, like they can find it online, but also for people who want to make it. Like I think that's really cool that like it's not something that needs to have amazing production value or like like an incredible team behind you. A lot of these things tend to be like low budget with high impact, and I think that's really cool. I think this is a great art art form for people who want to get into creative storytelling to do without breaking the bank, and it's something that could be easily generated and replicated, and really focuses on a sense of community, which is all things that I kind of value too, and like why I love the internet so much, even though the internet's like a terrible place sometimes. um, I I love the internet for these reasons, and I think it's a subgenre that maybe needs a little bit more love. I don't know, but I just really like analog horror. I know I have a positive opinion on a lot of these subgenres that I end up talking about, but it's just like stuff that interests me. So yeah. If you thought this was interesting, I'm going to leave all the links to all the videos and movies I recommended in the description below. Let me know what you think of them. Let me know in the comments like what your favorite analog horror media is, or what your favorite series is. There's other ones. There's like the Mandala Files or something. I haven't seen that one, but that was also recommended to me, but I didn't put it in this article. But yeah, there's some good ones out there. Let me know what you like in the comments down below, and let me know what you think about this. Is this too weird for you? I don't know. I feel like this genre tends to lend itself to some weird videos. But yeah. Anyways, if you like this video, feel free to like it. Let me know in the comments down below. Share with a friend and subscribe to the channel. Please, please, please. That would help me out a lot. And it would encourage me to make more sort of like semi-educational videos like this. And yeah, I would do more subgenre videos for you guys. But until next time, thanks so much for watching. Bye!